The November wind cut through Sarah Mitchell's thin jacket like 1,000 tiny needles, each one reminding her of how unprepared she was for another winter. She pulled her 18-month-old son, Tommy, closer to her chest, feeling his small body shiver against hers despite the blanket she had wrapped around him twice. The grocery store's automatic doors slid open, with a mechanical wheeze, releasing a wave of warm air that felt like salvation. Sarah stepped inside, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, leaving small puddles of melted snow. Behind her, Tommy stirred in her arms, his bright green eyes opening to take in the fluorescent lights above them. "Mama," he whispered, his voice still thick with sleep from their bus ride. "Hungry." Sarah's heart clenched at that single word, the same word she had been hearing more and more frequently these past weeks. She kissed his forehead gently, tasting the salt of dried tears from his earlier crying. "I know, baby. Mama's going to get you something to eat right now." The grocery store was busier than she had hoped it would be at 9 in the evening. Families were doing their weekly shopping, teenagers were grabbing snacks, and tired workers were picking up dinner on their way home. Sarah moved through the aisles like a ghost, trying to make herself invisible while calculating every penny. In her head, she had exactly $17.32 to her name, money she had scraped together by returning bottles and cans, by skipping her own meals for 3 days, and by selling her mother's old wedding ring to a pawn shop for a fraction of its worth. Each dollar had to count. In the baby food aisle, she reached for the cheapest jar of pureed vegetables, her hand trembling slightly as she checked the price. $2.15. She could afford 3 jars, maybe 4 if she didn't get milk. But Tommy needed milk. His pediatrician had been very clear about that during their last visit to the free clinic. She moved to the dairy section, her stomach growling so loudly that an elderly woman glanced at her with concern. Sarah forced a smile and looked away, focusing on the milk prices. The smallest container was $3.49. As she made her way through the store, Sarah's basket grew heavier with the weight of her careful choices. 4 jars of baby food, 1 small container of milk, a loaf of die-old bread, marked down to 99 cents, and a small bunch of bananas that were starting to turn brown. She had done the math 3 times in her head, and it came to exactly $16.98. That would leave her 34 cents, enough for the bus fare tomorrow if she walked part of the way. Tommy had fallen asleep again. In her arms, his head heavy against her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. She stood in line at the checkout, watching the cashier scan items for the customer ahead of her. The teenager behind the register looked bored, his eyes glazed over as he mechanically moved products across the scanner. When it was finally her turn, Sarah carefully placed her items on the conveyor belt, arranging them neatly, as if their presentation might somehow affect the total. The scanner beeped with each item, and Sarah watched the digital display climb higher with each beep. Baby food, $2.15. Baby food, $2.15. Baby food, $2.15. Baby food, $2.15. Milk, $3.49. Bread, 99 cents. Her heart started racing as she waited for the bananas to scan. The cashier weighed them, punched in a code, and the total appeared. $18.43. Sarah's blood turned to ice water in her veins. That couldn't be right. She had calculated everything so carefully. $18.43, the cashier repeated, his voice flat and uninterested. Sarah fumbled with her worn wallet, pulling out the crumpled bills and spreading them on the counter. A 10, a 5, 2 ones, $17. She dug through her pockets, finding only 28 cents in change. She was still 98 cents short. I thought it would be less, she stammered, her face burning with embarrassment, as she felt the eyes of other customers boring into her back. "Can you check again?" The cashier sighed dramatically and pointed at the screen. "Bananas are $1.25. They went up yesterday." Sarah's mind raced through her options. each one more humiliating than the last. She could put back the bread, but that was the only food she would have for herself for the next 3 days. She could put back 1 jar of baby food, but Tommy needed every meal she could provide. The milk was non-negotiable. Behind her, she heard someone clear their throat impatiently. A woman muttered something about people who couldn't afford groceries shouldn't be shopping at peak hours. Sarah's hand shook as she reached for the bananas. "I'll put these back," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the store's background music. The cashier had already started voiding the transaction when a deep voice spoke from behind her. "Add it to my bill." Sarah turned to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing directly behind her in line. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with silver streaks in his dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. Despite his formal attire, there was something warm about his expression, something that made him seem approachable despite the obvious wealth gap between them. "I couldn't," Sarah started to protest, but the man had already handed his black credit card to the cashier. "Please," he said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed. "No child should go without food." The cashier shrugged and completed Sarah's transaction first, then began scanning the man's items, a single bottle of water and a protein bar. Sarah stood frozen, clutching her grocery bag and Tommy, unsure whether to thank the stranger or run from the store in mortification. As the man signed his receipt, he looked at her again, this time really looking, as if seeing past her unwashed hair and threadbare clothes to something deeper. "How old is your son?" he asked gently. 18 months, Sarah managed to answer, adjusting Tommy's weight in her arms. The man smiled, a sad, knowing expression. "My daughter was that age when ... double quotes, he trailed off, shaking his head. "Take care of yourself and that beautiful boy." Before Sarah could respond, before she could even thank him properly, he was walking away, his long strides carrying him quickly toward the exit. She stood there for a moment, watching his retreating figure, wondering what story lay behind those storm cloud eyes. It wasn't until the next customer pointedly cleared their throat that she remembered where she was and hurried toward the door. Outside, the cold hit her again, but somehow it didn't feel quite as bitter as before. She had food for Tommy, enough for several days if she was careful. The stranger's kindness had given her more than just groceries. It had given her a moment of hope in what had been an endless stream of desperate days. She was adjusting Tommy's blanket, preparing for the walk to the bus stop, when she heard footsteps behind her. The man from the store was standing by an expensive black car, its engine running, heat visibly rising from its exhaust in the cold air. "Can I offer you a ride?" he called out. "It's too cold for a baby to be out here." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't know this man, regardless of his kindness in the store. But Tommy was shivering again, and the bus wouldn't come for another 40 minutes. The warmth of that car was too tempting to resist. "Just to the bus station on Maple Street," she said carefully, "if it's not too much trouble." The man opened the back door for her, and she climbed in, overwhelmed by the leather seats and the blessed warmth that enveloped them. As he pulled out of the parking lot, she caught sight of his reflection in the rearview mirror. There was something haunted in his expression, something that spoke of a pain she recognized all too well. "I'm Marcus," he said after a moment of silence. Marcus Sterling. Sarah had heard that name before. Sterling Industries was emblazoned on half the buildings downtown. This wasn't just a wealthy man. This was one of the richest men in the city. "Sarah," she replied quietly. "And this is Tommy?" Marcus glanced at them in the mirror, and his expression softened. "He looks like a fighter," he observed. "Gets that from his mother, I'd guess." Sarah didn't know how to respond to that, so she remained quiet, watching the city lights blur past the window. The short drive to the bus station took only minutes, but in that time, something shifted in the car's atmosphere. When Marcus pulled up to the curb, he turned around in his seat to face her directly. "I know this is presumptuous," he began, "but I own several businesses in the city. If you're looking for work, I could make some calls. Do you have any experience?" Sarah felt tears threatening to spill over. "I was an accountant," she admitted. Before everything fell apart. I have a degree, but no one wants to hire a single mother with no recent experience and no daycare." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Come to this address tomorrow at 10. Bring Tommy. We have an on-site daycare for employees' children." Sarah stared at the card, unable to process what was happening. "Why?" she asked, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. 3 years ago, my daughter Emma died from leukemia. She was 4 years old. My wife couldn't handle the grief. She left, took half my money, and moved to Europe. For a while, I thought about ending it all. The money, the success, none of it meant anything without Emma." He paused, seeming to gather himself. "Then one day, I was at my lowest point, sitting in my car outside a grocery store, trying to find a reason to keep going. I saw a young mother with twins, struggling to load her groceries while juggling both babies. I helped her, such a small thing, but she thanked me like I had saved her life. She said kindness from strangers was what kept her believing in humanity." His eyes met Sarah's. "That woman's gratitude saved my life that day. It reminded me that my wealth could mean something if I used it right. Since then, I've made it my mission to help where I can, especially single parents." Emma would have wanted that. Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks now, unable to stop them. Tommy stirred in her arms, whimpering softly, and she soothed him automatically. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say you'll come tomorrow," Marcus replied. "Give me a chance to honor my daughter's memory by helping you and Tommy have the life you deserve." Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. As she climbed out of the car with Tommy and her groceries, Marcus called out one more time. "Sarah, that strength you have, that determination to provide for your son no matter what, don't ever lose that. It's what's going to get you through this." She stood on the curb, watching his car disappear into the night traffic, the business card clutched in her hand like a lifeline. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be better than today. The next morning arrived with a fresh snowfall that made the city look clean and new. Sarah dressed in her best clothes, a navy blue blazer she had kept from her old life, and black pants that were only slightly too loose from all the weight she had lost. She dressed Tommy in his warmest outfit, the one without any stains, and caught the earliest bus to the address on Marcus's card. The building was a testament to modern architecture, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. Sarah stood outside for a moment, intimidated by its grandeur, before Tommy's babbling reminded her why she was there. The lobby was marble and mirrors, with a massive chandelier that probably cost more than she had made in her entire working life. She approached the reception desk, where an impeccably dressed woman looked up with a professional smile. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Mr. Sterling asked me to come." The woman's smile became genuine. "Of course. He's expecting you. Please, take the executive elevator to the 15th floor. Someone will meet you there." The elevator ride seemed to last forever, and no time at all. When the doors opened, Sarah found herself in a reception area that was somehow both elegant and welcoming. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair approached immediately. "You must be Sarah. I'm Janet, Mr. Sterling's executive assistant, and this handsome young man must be Tommy." She reached out to tickle Tommy's chin, making him giggle. "Let me show you our daycare facilities first. I think you'll want to see where Tommy will be before your interview." The daycare was nothing like Sarah had imagined. It was a paradise for children, with soft play areas, educational toys, trained staff, and even a small indoor playground. The woman in charge, Mrs. Henderson, had 30 years of experience and immediately put Sarah at ease with her competence and warmth. After settling Tommy, who was quickly distracted by the array of toys, Janet led Sarah to a conference room where Marcus was waiting. He stood when she entered, that same kind expression from last night on his face. "Sarah, thank you for coming. Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" Sarah accepted water, her mouth suddenly dry with nerves. As she sat across from him at the polished table, she noticed a framed photo on the sideboard, a little girl with Marcus's eyes and a brilliant smile. "That must be Emma. I had my team pull some general accounting tests last night," Marcus began, sliding a folder across to her. "Nothing too complex, just to see where you are. Take your time. I have a conference call in the other room, so you'll have privacy." For the next hour, Sarah worked through the problems, her mind clicking back into the familiar patterns she had thought were lost forever. It felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she had forgotten existed. When Marcus returned, she had completed everything, including adding notes about more efficient methods for some of the processes outlined. Marcus reviewed her work, his eyebrows rising. "You didn't just complete these correctly," he said slowly. "You improved on them. How long were you out of work?" 2 years, Sarah admitted. "My husband left when Tommy was born with a heart condition. The medical bills destroyed us, and then I couldn't afford daycare to work, and it just spiraled." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Tommy's heart condition, is it managed now?" Sarah nodded. "He needs medication and regular checkups, but the free clinic has been wonderful. He's actually doing really well, considering everything." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I'm going to make you an offer," he said finally. "It's probably going to seem too good to be true, but I need you to know it's legitimate." He turned to face her. "Starting salary of $70,000 a year. Full health benefits that will cover all of Tommy's medical needs. Flexible hours to accommodate his appointments. Free on-site daycare. And if you need it, I own an apartment building downtown with a unit that just became available. Reduced rent until you're on your feet." Sarah stared at him, convinced she had misheard. That was more than she had made at her previous job, and the benefits were beyond anything she had dared hope for. "This is ... I don't. Why would you do all this?" Marcus returned to his seat, his expression serious. "Because I can. Because Emma taught me that life is too short and too precious not to help when you have the means. And because, frankly, you're qualified. Your test results show that. This isn't charity, Sarah. This is an investment in someone who deserves a second chance." Sarah felt the walls she had built around her heart, the ones that kept her from hoping for too much, beginning to crumble. "When would I start?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Monday, if you're ready. That gives you the weekend to move into the apartment if you want it." Marcus pushed another card across the table. "This is the building manager's number. Tell him I sent you." The next few days passed in a whirlwind. The apartment was small but clean, with 2 bedrooms and windows that actually let in light. It was in a safe neighborhood with a park nearby where Tommy could play. The building manager, clearly familiar with Marcus's philanthropic tendencies, helped her move her few possessions from the moldy studio apartment she had been renting week to week. By Sunday night, Sarah stood in her new living room, Tommy playing happily with his toys on a carpet that wasn't stained or torn, and felt like she was living someone else's life. The fear that it would all be taken away, that she would wake up and find it had been a dream, kept her awake most of the night. But Monday morning came, and it was real. She dropped Tommy at the daycare, where he immediately toddle-ran to Mrs. Henderson, already comfortable in the space. Her new office was small, but had a window, and Janet had left a welcome basket on her desk with office supplies, and touchingly, a small framed photo holder with a note that said for Tommy's picture. The work was challenging but manageable, and Sarah threw herself into it with determination. She arrived early, stayed late when needed, and within a month had reorganized the entire filing system for better efficiency. Her colleagues, initially skeptical of someone Marcus had personally hired, quickly warmed to her competence and quiet dedication. Marcus himself kept a respectful distance, checking in occasionally, but never making her feel like a charity case. 3 months into the job, Sarah was working late on a particularly complex audit when Marcus knocked on her door. "You should go home," he said gently. "Tommy will be wondering where you are." Sarah looked at the clock, surprised to find it was past 7. "Mrs. Henderson doesn't mind. She says he's an angel." Marcus smiled. "I'm sure he is, but that's not the point. The work will be here tomorrow." He paused, then added, "Can I ask you something? Why do you push yourself so hard? You've already proven yourself 10 times over." Sarah set down her pen, considering her answer. "Because I'm terrified," she admitted. "Terrified that if I'm not perfect, if I don't prove my worth every single day, it'll all disappear. That I'll be back in that grocery store, unable to afford bananas for my son." Marcus sat down in the chair across from her desk. "I understand that fear," he said quietly. "After Emma died, I worked 20-hour days because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. But Sarah, you can't run forever. At some point, you have to trust that you've earned your place." Sarah felt tears threatening again, something that happened less frequently now, but still caught her at unexpected moments. "It's hard to trust when you've lost everything before." Marcus nodded. "I know, but that's exactly why you need to try. Tommy needs a mother who's present, not just providing, and you need to forgive yourself for the things that weren't your fault." That night, Sarah went home at a reasonable hour. She cooked dinner for herself, and Tommy, gave him a bath, and read him 3 stories before bed. As she watched him sleep, his little chest rising and falling steadily, she thought about Marcus's words. Maybe it was time to stop running, to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe it was time to actually live the life she had been given. The seasons changed, winter melting into spring, and with it came growth Sarah hadn't anticipated. She received her first performance review with glowing remarks and a raise. Tommy was thriving in daycare, his vocabulary exploding, and his health stable. The apartment had become a home, with drawings on the refrigerator and toys scattered across the living room. She had even made friends among her colleagues, joining them for lunch occasionally instead of eating at her desk. One evening in May, almost 6 months after that night in the grocery store, Sarah was pushing Tommy on a swing in the park when she saw Marcus walking a golden retriever. He waved and came over, the dog immediately interested in Tommy, who squealed with delight. "I didn't know you had a dog," Sarah said, laughing as the retriever licked Tommy's face. "Just got her last week," Marcus replied. "The house was too quiet. This is Bella." As they talked, Tommy toddling after Bella in the grass, Sarah realized that somewhere along the way, Marcus had become more than just her employer. He was a friend, someone who understood loss and resilience, someone who had chosen to transform his pain into purpose. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said suddenly. "That night in the grocery store, I wasn't there by accident. I had been sitting in the parking lot for an hour, trying to convince myself to go home to my empty house. When I finally went in, and saw you with Tommy, saw the way you looked at him with such fierce love, despite your circumstances, it reminded me that love persists, even after loss. You helped me that night, as much as I helped you." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at his admission. "We helped each other," she said softly. "Maybe that's how it's supposed to work. People finding each other when they need it most." Marcus smiled, that sad, knowing expression, replaced with something lighter, more hopeful. "Maybe you're right." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, They walked back toward their respective homes, Tommy on Marcus's shoulders, Bella trotting alongside. Sarah thought about how a moment of kindness in a grocery store had changed everything. How one person choosing to see beyond circumstances had altered the trajectory of 2 lives, possibly 3 if you counted Tommy. A year later, Sarah stood in that same grocery store, this time with a full wallet and a shopping list for Tommy's birthday party. She was comparing prices out of habit, more than necessity, when she noticed a young woman at the checkout, frantically counting change while holding a crying infant. The cashier, the same bored teenager from that night, though a little older now, was sighing dramatically. Sarah abandoned her cart and walked to the register. "Add it to mine," she said firmly, handing over her credit card before the woman could protest. The woman looked at her with a mixture of shock and relief that Sarah recognized all too well. "I can't accept," she began. "Yes, you can," Sarah interrupted gently. "Someone once did the same for me when I needed it most. This is how we pay it forward." As she helped the woman bag her groceries, Sarah shared a shortened version of her story, ending with Marcus's business card, which she now kept several of in her purse for moments like this. "He has a program now," she explained, "for single parents who need a chance. Tell him Sarah Mitchell sent you." The woman clutched the card like Sarah once had, tears streaming down her face. As Sarah walked to her car, she saw Marcus's vehicle in the parking lot. He was leaning against it, watching her with a proud smile. "Janet told me you were here," he said as she approached. "Thought I might find you doing exactly what you just did." Sarah shrugged, embarrassed. It was nothing. Marcus shook his head. It was everything to her. "You've referred 12 people to the program this month alone. Do you know that?" Sarah hadn't been keeping count. She just knew what it felt like to be desperate. To need someone to see you as human when the world seemed determined to make you invisible. "I have something to tell you," Marcus said, his expression becoming serious. "I've been thinking about this for months, and I need to say it before I lose my nerve." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Over the past year, their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had quite named. The coffee meetings that weren't quite dates. The family dinners where Tommy called Marcus Uncle Mark. The way Marcus's eyes lit up when she walked into a room. "Emma would have loved you," Marcus said quietly. "She would have loved Tommy, and I think she would want me to tell you that somewhere between that first night and now, I fell in love with you. Not because you needed saving, but because you never really did. You just needed someone to see who you really were." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had been so focused on survival, on providing for Tommy, on proving herself worthy of the chance she had been given, that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge what had been growing between them. But standing there in the parking lot, where it all began, she realized she had fallen in love with him too. With his kindness, his understanding, his way of making her feel valuable, not for what she did, but for who she was. "I love you too," she whispered, "but I'm scared. I've lost so much before." Marcus stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "So have I. But maybe that's why we understand each other. Maybe that's why this works." He pulled her into an embrace, and Sarah let herself melt into it, feeling safer than she had in years. 3 years after that first meeting, Sarah stood in a white dress in the garden behind Marcus's house, which had become their house 6 months earlier. Tommy, now 5 and healthy as could be, stood beside Marcus as the ring-bearer, taking his job very seriously. The wedding was small, just close friends and the colleagues who had become family. Mrs. Henderson was there, wiping tears as she watched the boy she had helped raise stand so proudly. Janet was the maid of honor, having become Sarah's closest friend. The woman from the grocery store, Maria, was there too with her daughter, now thriving thanks to the program Marcus had expanded in Sarah's honor, as Sarah and Marcus exchanged vows, promising to love each other through abundance and scarcity. Through joy and sorrow, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The title of their story, Poor Girl with Her Baby Gets Rejected. At checkout suddenly, the Millionaire CEO steps forward, and seemed like a lifetime ago, yet it was the beginning of everything. And creates a love story born from kindness, Marcus whispered, finishing the sentence as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Sarah laughed through her tears. That's a terrible title for a love story, she teased. Maybe, Marcus agreed, pulling her close for their first kiss as husband and wife. But it's our story. As their guests applauded and Tommy jumped up and down with excitement, Sarah realized that sometimes the most beautiful endings come from the most difficult beginnings. The rejected girl at the checkout had become a successful professional, a beloved wife, and most importantly, she had never lost sight of who she was, a mother who would do anything for her child, a woman who had learned that accepting help wasn't weakness, and a person who understood that kindness, whether given or received, had the power to change everything. The grocery store, where it all began, now bore a plaque near the entrance. Funded by the Sterling Foundation, it read, "In this place, kindness changed lives. May it change many more." And it did. Every month, Sarah and Marcus returned to that store, watching for moments where they could make a difference. They had created a fund specifically for grocery assistance, ensuring that no parent would have to choose between bread and baby food, between milk and dignity. Tommy, now understanding the story of how Marcus had come into their lives, would often ask to come along, eager to help other children who might be hungry. Years passed, and their family grew. They adopted siblings from foster care, giving them the stable home Marcus had never had as a child. They established scholarship programs for single parents returning to school. They transformed Marcus's company into one of the most family-friendly employers in the state. But they never forgot that night in the checkout line, when a desperate mother with $17 to her name met a grieving father who had millions but felt bankrupt in every way that mattered. They never forgot that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, a few dollars for groceries, a ride on a cold night, a business card offered with genuine intent, could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. On the 10th anniversary of that night, they held a celebration at the community center they had built. Hundreds of families attended, all of them touched in some way by the programs Sarah and Marcus had created. As Sarah stood before the crowd, Tommy, now a teenager, beside her, and Marcus holding their younger children, she thought about the title of their story one more time. Poor Girl with Her Baby Gets Rejected at Checkout. Suddenly, the Millionaire CEO steps forward, and the end was everything. It was hope. It was possibility. It was proof that no situation is permanent, that kindness is never wasted, and that sometimes, when you think you're at your lowest point, you're actually standing at the beginning of something beautiful, and changes everything, Sarah said, aloud, finishing the thought. Marcus squeezed her hand, understanding immediately. Everything, he agreed, as she looked out at the faces before her, mothers who had found work, children who had found stability, families who had found hope. Sarah knew that their story was really just one of many. Each person in that room had their own version of standing at a checkout, counting coins, wondering how they would make it through. And each of them had found their own version of someone stepping forward, offering not just help, but dignity, not just charity, but opportunity. The title of their story might have started with rejection and desperation, but it had become about so much more. It was about the power of seeing people not for their circumstances but for their potential. It was about understanding that wealth isn't just about money but about what you do with whatever resources you have. It was about learning that sometimes, the best way to heal your own wounds is to help heal someone else's. And most of all, it was about love, unexpected, transformative love, that could grow from the simplest act of human kindness. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah and Marcus stood together, watching their children play with the other kids, seeing their story multiplied in the lives they had touched. The poor girl with her baby, who had been rejected at checkout, had become so much more than she ever imagined possible. And the millionaire CEO who had stepped forward had found something money could never buy. A family, a purpose, and a love that had transformed his wealth from a burden into a blessing. Their story, which began with such a simple title, had become an epic tale of redemption, resilience, and the remarkable things that can happen when one person decides to help another. It was proof that no title, no matter how desperate it might seem, has to define the ending. Sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin with the hardest chapters, and the most profound love grows from the simplest acts of kindness. And in that grocery store, where it all began, the checkout line that had once been a place of shame and desperation had become something else entirely. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that you never know when a stranger might change your life, or when you might have the power to change someone else's. The title of their story was no longer about a poor girl being rejected. It was about what happens when humanity triumphs over indifference, when love conquers fear, and when two broken people help each other become whole again. Poor girl with her baby gets rejected at checkout suddenly. The millionaire CEO steps forward and creates a legacy of love that will outlive them both. That was the real title, the complete story, the truth of what had happened when kindness met desperation in a checkout line on a cold November night. It was a story worth telling, worth retelling, and worth living every single day. And Sarah and Marcus Sterling did exactly that. One act of kindness at a time, one changed life at a time, proving that sometimes the best stories are the ones that never really end but continue growing, spreading hope like seeds in fertile ground, creating forests of possibility where once there was only barren earth.